Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He's such a great character. He's so much fun to be around, to listen. You know, he's a snarky smartass, and he's just a lot of fun to read, especially when he's in a dire situation where you're expecting a character to be flustered or angry or this, and he's still popping jokes left and right. It's a lot of fun. He's by far my favorite character, and that's really hard to say because I do read comics, I do watch shows, I have a lot of heroes to choose from, and I'm fans of a lot of people. So it takes a lot for me to single out someone and say that this is my favorite. And Spider-Man is my favorite, which makes this very difficult because the whole point of this little series of videos is to point out issues with the characters. And unfortunately, Spider-Man is not invulnerable to this. He's got plenty of issues. A lot of them come back to writing, which we will get to in a different video, but for the most part, he's a kid. I know in the main continuity he's been allowed to get older, but for a long time that wasn't the case. He was always in high school. He eventually moved to college and was in college for a long time. And then there was a reboot and he's back in high school. Or they made it so that he didn't graduate college and had to go back. Please tell me I'm misinterpreting something, because I remember reading at one point and being very confused. Someone as smart as Peter Parker not finishing college. Please tell me I was wrong about that. But he's never allowed to grow up, never allowed to change and grow. You've seen multiple variations of the character through the multiverse that is the Marvel comic. In fact, they did a whole crossover event about it called Spider-Verse, where you got to meet a lot of the different Spider-Man. Not all of them. There's still plenty of them that weren't involved, but you got to see a bunch of them. And you got to see the character in different ways, in different imaginings, and it was a lot of fun. But for the most part, all those characters, almost all of them, were kids, high schoolers, early college. With the exception of the main continuity Spider-Man, and the Superior Spider-Man, they were the only adults in the group. Seriously? Can we have a mature Spider-Man, please? And that's really hard to say because he's known as a snarky jackass. That's what he does a lot. He drives his villains up the wall with his comments and his jokes, and he just never stops. So saying a mature Spider-Man almost inherently says he stops doing that, in which case he stops being Spider-Man. We don't want that. Which is an issue with the character. Alright, I'm going to jump into this in the next video too, but a lot of these issues that I'm talking about the main character reflect on the writing. But the writing is reflected off of sales, and sales are based off us, the consumers. So if the readers are babies and they don't want anything to change and they want things to stay exactly the way they like it, well, that's what the writers are going to do, and that's the comic books we get, and then we get disappointed because there's no change or growth in our characters. Ugh. Once again, I'll get to that in another video. But Spider-Man has a no-killing rule just like Batman. And just like Batman, he's broken it a few times. Now, that isn't to say a lot of the people he goes against are vicious or terrible, like a lot of the characters Batman goes up against, so the issue's not as strong there because, hey, the Rhino breaks stuff. He rampages a lot. But generally speaking, I don't ever recall reading him where he outright kills someone or goes after people to kill. No, he's usually just stealing or acting as a distraction for a larger operation, and he never kills. He tries to hurt or maim, particularly Spider-Man, but he never outright kills. So a lot of Spider-Man's villains are like that, with the exception of someone like Carnage or the Green Goblin. And that's really one we should focus on, because Green Goblin is like Spider-Man's Joker. Ugh. Well, that's a whole convoluted bag. The Goblins started off with Norman Osborn, but it eventually expanded to a whole mess. You have a Demon Goblin, you have multiple sets of Hobgoblins, you have the second Green Goblin, Harry Osborn. You just too much. You know what? We're not focusing on that character because there's just too much to break down. But essentially, actually, there's a thing that Marvel does that DC doesn't. Marvel has its own specialized prisons for supervillains. They don't throw them into something like Arkham Asylum meant for regular crazy people over and over again. Another issue with Spider-Man is actually an issue Batman has as well. He's a loner. He does things by himself. He doesn't like to get other people involved. He doesn't like relying on others. He believes it's his responsibility to do everything himself. And that's a huge issue for the character, because you always see it, especially in crossovers or team-ups. He doesn't generally play well with others. I mean, he eventually does. He comments and does his usual shtick, and everything tends to work out. But when it's a situation where it's his issue, his problem, and other people try to help him, you see him very quickly and very belligerently you say no, close them off, put them somewhere away from him. This is my problem. That's an issue with the character, because if he did that the first couple times, especially as a kid, with that whole thing of with power comes great responsibility, still being a fresh, cut, and clean, no gray area issue, with no level of maturity to understand that to a better degree, that makes sense. That's okay. But after it's gone to the point, like I just recently read Jim Butcher's Darkest Hour, where he did the same thing again, but this is after college Spider-Man. This is him as a teacher. This is someone who should automatically know that this issue that he's currently facing in this book is beyond him to handle himself. No matter how experienced he is, and no matter how dangerous it is, he should be looking for help. And he eventually does in the book, and he eventually accepts help from those around him. And it's an arc for that character, and you eventually see that growth that I've mentioned that isn't in the other comics. But then you look at stories immediately after this, and he's still the same thing. He's like he didn't learn a lesson at all. Come on, guys. Seriously. Let your comic book heroes grow a little bit. And that's another part of the Spider-Man character, his own sense of responsibility being a little too extreme. And in fact has caused a lot of problems. Like the whole thing with him turning into the Man-Spider. I've only watched the animated version of that in the 90s TV show, so I'm not sure if they did it any different in comics, but essentially he kept trying to make it something so that he would have to fix until it was too late, in which case he started looking around for help from the X-Men, from someone who turned the doctor turned Craven the Hunter into Craven the Hunter, and they couldn't help him. It would, well, at least not till it's too late, where he turned into the Man Spider. But because it was his issue initially, he just blocked everyone else out and tried to handle it himself. Very reliant on his own personal knowledge and ability, and as great as that is, he can't do all this by himself, and you don't see him grow. You see these issues happen again and again and again, and he never grows and never gets past that. And it's caused issues. It's caused things like, you know, if you asked me any other time, I could give you a dozen examples. For some reason, now that I'm talking to a camera trying to get it all out, it's drawing a blank. Oh, well, the symbiotes. Like, he became Black Suit Spider-Man, which eventually attached itself to Eddie Brock and became Venom. Well, over the course of the history of Venom and Spider-Man, they've had multiple encounters, and there were a great number of times where it could have been handled, and it wasn't. And usually because Spider-Man was trying to take responsibility for Venom's actions, because, well, Venom wouldn't exist without Spider-Man. Not necessarily true, but and as a result, the other symbiotes came to be, such as Carnage. Oh dear God, that was like, we could have captured the symbiote earlier on and set it on fire until there was nothing left, and would have been done with it. No, not doing that. Now we have Carnage, an insane psychopathic killer with superpowers and damn near unstoppable. Joy, which of course led to the other symbiotes, Toxin. Once again, any other day I would have numbered them off just down the line and got nothing. Toxin, Anti-Venom, never mind. But that's just one example where there's something that could have been easily solved if Spider-Man was just a little bit more mature about the situation, but because he's so headstrong in his own sense of taking responsibility and not seeking others for help. I mean, that is something that just keeps on happening. You want him to grow beyond that. And I keep harping on this, and it's been 13 minutes. Alright. So far, these videos are becoming a bust. But I'm going to keep going and see where this goes. Next video, instead of picking on a certain character, I'm going to start picking on the people who deserve it the most. The readers. Bye.